This is the story about a simple shed that honestly kickstarted my whole business, and then, almost overnight, everything changed. For this particular shed, I drove 800 kilometers, about 500 miles, assembled it in the middle of winter, and drove over mountain passes in a blizzard. All within 24 hours. No sleep. I do not recommend that to anyone, but it's a pretty good illustration of the determination it sometimes takes to make something work. It was early in the pandemic. Lumber prices were still reasonable back then, which feels almost unreal to say now. People weren't traveling, restaurants were quiet, and suddenly a lot of that vacation money got redirected into home projects instead. Decks, fences, workshops, small sheds, anything that made staying at home feel better. And that's where my idea started. I wanted to make a small IKEA-style shed. Simple, clean. No complicated choices. Something I could build in my shop, load into my van, deliver, and assemble fast at the customer's place. Fuel was cheaper too, so I could cover a pretty big area without the delivery cost killing the deal. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt like a real opportunity if I was willing to put in the time. The plan was basically start small, move fast, learn as I go. At first, the shed was pretty straightforward to build. And I remember thinking, if I could just sell enough of these, I can streamline everything. I could pre-build the wall panels, standardize the cuts, keep a stack of parts ready. And when an order came in, I'd basically just grab a kit, throw it in the van, and go. In my head, it was the perfect system, almost like a tiny production line. And it worked. I got orders. I got momentum. I got that feeling you get when you realize, wait, this might actually become something. That shed wasn't just a shed. It was proof that strangers were willing to pay for something I built with my own hands. That's a big moment when you're trying to start a business. But then a problem appeared, and it was completely my own doing. I started thinking I should build bigger and better. Insulated garden rooms, even small cabins. I'd built larger buildings before, so I thought, why not? So I did it. I built, and people ordered. I delivered them using expensive crane trucks and trailers, and I actually got good traction. But build times became longer, and suddenly the simple shed production line idea wasn't realistic anymore. I didn't have enough space to keep shed kits ready, and I didn't have enough time to build everything efficiently. It doesn't sound like a problem, right? More orders, bigger projects, that should be a win. But I learned something the hard way. Trying to do too many things at once gets messy fast. Focus disappears. You're always chasing the next better idea. You're constantly switching tools, switching workflows, switching plans. And the cliches are true. Keep it simple. Don't fix something that isn't broken. And honestly, that wasn't even the biggest challenge on the horizon. Because then the real turn happened. Prices on everything started climbing. Not just lumber, everything. Hardware, sheet goods, paint, delivery, fuel. Even things that have nothing to do with building somehow got more expensive. And once basic everyday costs go up, like food, people start prioritizing very differently. Suddenly, selling sheds and small buildings at a normal price became almost impossible. I could either raise prices to a level that felt crazy, or keep prices lower and basically work for free. Neither option is great if you're trying to build a real business. And that's the sad part. I didn't lose interest in building. I didn't stop liking the work. I lost motivation because the numbers stopped making sense. When costs explode and customers get cautious, it drains the excitement out of it. It's hard to stay fired up when every quote feels like a gamble, and every material run feels like a surprise bill. Money isn't my motivation, but the business still has to cover basic needs, and ideally a little more. And honestly, I'm not super optimistic about things going back to how they were. Maybe they will eventually. But right now, the simple shed business that felt so promising in the beginning feels like it belongs to a completely different time. Still, I don't regret it, because that shed taught me what worked, what didn't, and what not to waste time on. And even though everything took a turn, that one simple shed was the thing that got the whole journey started. When one door closes, a new one opens. And at this point, it's way too late to give up now. But enough rambling about my failed business model. Let's actually finish this shed, because I can tell you exactly what I would do differently today. Back then, my idea was to keep these sheds high quality, so the price made sense, even though it was a simple building. And I still believe in quality. But here's what I've learned. High quality does not mean using bigger lumber than you need. If I built this shed again, the first change would be reducing the lumber dimensions. Not because I want it weaker, but because it saves weight, saves space, and makes the whole thing easier to transport and assemble. When you're loading this into a van, every extra kilo matters. When you're carrying panels through snow, every centimeter matters. And when you're doing this repeatedly, those small savings turn into real money. The second thing I would change is the bracing. In this shed, I added braces everywhere. Every wall, every element, basically everything got braced like it was going to survive a zombie apocalypse. It felt safe, but it was overkill. One brace per wall would have been plenty, even for sheds bigger than this. And less bracing means faster assembly, fewer cuts, fewer mistakes, and a cleaner build. Third, I would switch to simple steel braces in the right places. That would eliminate a lot of the notching in the studs, which takes time, adds complexity, and makes production slower. A steel brace is quick, strong, predictable, and you don't need to be a perfectionist with a saw for it to work. And the fourth big change is probably the most important one if you want to do this as a real product. I would keep as many elements as possible the exact same size. Standardization is everything. If you have 10 slightly different parts, you don't just have 10 parts. You have 10 ways to mess up. But if you can make most of the pieces identical, same lengths, same spacing, same layout, you can move fast without constantly measuring and second-guessing yourself. If I was doing a production run, I'd build simple jigs. Nothing fancy. Just basic setups where you drop the lumber in, it locks into the right position, and you nail the elements together. That's how you get speed without sacrificing quality. The jig becomes your brain, and your hands just do the work. And for cutting, I'd do the same thing. I'd make a cutting jig so I could cut multiple pieces at once consistently, with the same length every time. When you're cutting hundreds of parts, measuring each one is where time disappears. A jig turns careful cutting into repeatable cutting. And repeatable cutting is what makes a simple shed business actually work. So yeah, if I'm being honest, the shed itself was never the problem. The idea was good enough. The demand was real. The problem was everything around it. Prices changed. Priorities shifted. But what about the tools? One of the nice things about modern wood construction is that tools are actually pretty affordable now. You don't need a huge, professional setup to get started. You can get surprisingly far with just a few solid hand tools and a couple of reliable power tools. The real bottleneck for a small business like this usually isn't the tools, it's space. If you want this to be efficient, you really want to work indoors. The weather doesn't care about your deadlines, and building outside is slow, uncomfortable, and inconsistent. Having a dry, warm place where you can leave things set up, keep materials organized, and work year-round, that's where the real productivity comes from. I was lucky. I found a cheap workshop with no electricity cost, and it was set up so I could literally drive my car into the shop and unload materials straight where I needed them. That sounds like a small thing, but it changes everything. Space is honestly the most undervalued tool in the whole business. People tend to obsess over the tools first, what saw, what nailer, what brand, but none of that matters much if you don't have room to build, store, and move efficiently. And if you look closely, you'll notice I built the entire shed in my workshop. That's because I was still in the early prototype stage, and I didn't want surprises out on a customer's property. I wanted full control. If something didn't line up, I could fix it immediately. No stress, no rushing, no well. I guess we'll figure it out in the snow. But in a real production run, you wouldn't build the full shed like that. You'd build the elements. Wall panels, floor sections, roof parts. Then you'd stack them, pack them into the car, or even better, load them onto a trailer, and you'd assemble on site with as few steps as possible. That's the difference between building a shed and running a shed business. All right, that's what I've got. Enjoy the rest of the video and the wild, beautiful landscape of Norway on my slightly insane delivery trip to Oslo.